Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 is one of the best Star Wars games ever and one of my favorite RPGs ever. I've been playing it since I was like 5 years old, and I've beaten it more times than I can count. The very first weapon you unlock in KOTOR 2 is the plasma torch, which essentially isn't even a weapon, it's more like a lockpick. It only does 1 to 6 damage. You do more than that unarmed. And immediately after opening the first door with it, you get real weapons, so you're not expected to use it again for anything except opening stuff. But what if you never gave up the plasma torch? I'm a frog, and for this video, I wanted to see if I could make it through the entirety of KOTOR 2 only using the plasma torch. Here are the rules. I can only inflict damage with the plasma torch. No offensive force powers like lightning. I can't use grenades, mines, or other weapons, obviously. I have to do combat encounters solo when possible. There are times when the game forces you to have squad mates, so obviously it's fine then. But also, if I'm just free roaming and doing quests and there's no one to fight, I am allowed to have squad mates then, because that way I can still get influence and stuff because the completionist in me demands it. I also played on the hardest difficulty, difficult. So those are the rules. Let's hop in. Like every other RPG, KOTOR 2 begins with you creating a character. Because I was limited on the force powers I could use, I chose the Guardian class, which is less force-focused and more feat-focused. For my portrait, I chose this guy, of course, because any other choice is incorrect. I did have a lot of different ways I could go on the attribute screen. Originally, I was going to give myself almost max strength, but decided to reallocate a couple more to wisdom so I'd have plenty of force points for defensive powers. I also gave myself 16 constitution, which increases health and fortitude saves, and no points in intelligence, making my character an average Twitter user. For skills, this entire playthrough, I'm just putting points into treat injury. And for my first feat, I went with toughness, which gives you 1 extra health point every level up. As for a name, I chose one that felt appropriate given my appearance, and that's my character. We will find out if this dude can beat the whole game with only a plasma torch. Our journey begins with the Ebon Hawk adrift in space after a terrible battle.
The Ebon Hawk is adrift in space.
I just said that! Space Jesus is heard and blah blah blah. I skipped the tutorial like everyone else who plays this game. We cut to a new planet where I'm in a cryotube until I get a bad case of the hiccups, then I wake up and am free to roam around. After unlocking the door to the morgue, I found the plasma torch and was greeted by that lady from the Philosophy of Kreia video. I gave her a light side response since without offensive powers, it was definitely in my interest to be light side. Not to mention I also feel bad about being evil in video games, as I discussed in a video that no one watched. After bashing open the first door, I picked up an actual weapon which I unfortunately couldn't use, then it was time to fight droids with the plasma torch. For this playthrough, I used Flurry, which gives you an extra attack per turn. I usually use Flurry anyway because I like loading up on attacks, and that would be one of my main character building focuses here. A lot of what I'll do is just so that I can get more attacks. Anyway, none of these encounters are hard. You're expected to be solo and have either the plasma torch or something not much better anyway. For my first level up, I got the weapon focus feat for melee weapons, which increases my chance to hit, and I unlocked the energy resistance power. What this power does is block the first 6 points of damage from basically all but melee attacks. So a 10-point attack would only do 4 damage to me. I ran around this big room and finished off the rest of the droids, hit a switch, met Adden Rand, who's basically mentally ill Karth, freed him, ran back to the terminal, and contacted Discount R2-D2. There are a number of points in this game where you play as your squad mates. What I decided was that the plasma torch thing doesn't apply to those sections. I see the point of this challenge being to build an MC that can go plasma torch only, not companions who can go plasma torch only. Not to mention that T3 can't use it at all. Speaking of T3, I never even use his blaster. I just abuse a shock arm that has unlimited uses, never misses, and usually does more damage than a blaster. The Ebon Hawk is right outside the window on this level, but we can't get to it yet for plot reasons, so instead as T3, I have to fight my way to the fuel depot, open an emergency hatch for the Exile with this console, and then get murdered. Rip little bro. We cut back to Rand giving my character a long monologue about individualism versus collectivism before setting off to the emergency hatch that T3 opened. Once there, I found clothes, shields, headgear, and a belt, so I was now fully loaded. Unfortunately, the skill bonuses that I got for some of these things didn't really matter because my character was an unskilled dummy. But he's good with the plasma torch, and that's all that we care about. At this point in the game, though, I still wasn't entirely competent with my new playstyle. Like in this fight, for some reason, I just didn't use my energy resistance power and took way more damage than I should have. But still, you're expected to be solo and almost unlevel throughout this, so it's not too bad. Like in the middle of this fight, I was having such an easy time that I paused to make sure that I was playing on difficult. And yes, I was. This was just really easy. My next level up saw me get the conditioning feat to improve my saves because I had literally nothing else to pick at this point. But more importantly, I did get to unlock the force power Burst of Speed. The initial speed power is whatever, but the tier 2 and tier 3 versions were essential for me. me. Also, I'm trying to not sound like a giant nerd when talking about all this stuff, but I feel like I'm failing miserably. There's an easy way to make it so the rest of the droids on the map can't see you at all, which is what I would usually do, but because my character this time is dumb, he couldn't figure it out, and I had to fight them all straight up. It was fine though, I was one-shotting pretty much everyone. I looted some stuff and killed some droids, and barely made it out of the tunnels before they exploded and ran into a gray protocol droid whose dialogue I sped through as fast as possible, cause boy is there a lot. This area has the very first workbench of the game. One of the things I like about KOTOR 2 over the original is that there's a crafting system that lets you make all kinds of upgrades, and you have a lot more freedom with your weapons and armor than in KOTOR 1. So for example, here I put an underlay into my armor that lets me regen health faster. Unfortunately, I'm not able to upgrade the plasma torch. The game did introduce tougher droids in this part, the Mark IIs, but they still drop in one hit. I had a level up that I unlocked Effect Mine with. It lets you do the old "these aren't the droids you're looking for" trick, which wasn't useful at the moment, but I wanted to make sure I had it for when I needed it. Now in outer space, you move at 50 miles per hour because people complained about how slow you walked in the first game, but this newfound sense of speed is immediately blown apart by the longest cutscene of all time, where we watch a captured Republic warship, the Harbinger, slowly dock at Paragus because this guy who looks like he listens to 3 Days Grace is coming for me. But in the meantime, I have more droids to take out and lockers to loot, which gets me a bunch of stuff including gloves that give me a 30% immunity to cold attacks. And I definitely needed them because up next I had to fight fire extinguishers. When I was a kid, these things would wreck me if I tried to kill them with a melee weapon. So what I ended up doing and what I've always done is just hang back out of the range and shoot them. I never knew you could successfully rush them until this playthrough. With the gloves and my energy resistance power, they basically couldn't even damage me. I took out some more droids and fire extinguishers. I had a level up that let me get improved flurry and the Force Valor power, which increases my saving throws and all attributes by 2 while active. If you don't understand how combat works in this game, let me just tell you that that's a pretty substantial buff. Then I paid a visit to the miners that made it to the dormitories where they were promptly gassed, which is less than ideal, but I did get to loot a bunch of more stuff, including this armor that I decided not to wear. Armor would improve my defense by quite a bit, but the trade-off is that I couldn't use all of my force powers, and I don't think the trade-off is worth it. You'll see why as I go through the game. Anyway, I figured out the code to unlock the door to leave and go back to the main area. Once there, Kreia said howdy do and decided to come with me, as did these guys, so we ran to get Atten, but unfortunately the HK-50 droid from earlier caught wind of our plan and was not happy. Unfortunately for him though, he sucks and is easy to kill. This is an example of an area where you're required to have companions, by the way. So for the rest of Paragus, I have help. We boarded the Republic warship, and I made sure to gain influence with Atten over Kreia because influencing Atten has tangible benefits, whereas influencing Kreia lets me access lore that I've already heard 50 times. Much like the droids, the Sith assassins all over the Harbinger were absolutely no match for the power of the plasma torch, especially since I had Atten and Krey Dog watching my back. I had another level up with no feats, but I did unlock the heal power, so that was cool. You can probably guess what it does based on its name.
Unless you're stupid.
I very intentionally made sure to clear every single Sith encounter on the ship. I didn't want to miss any. They were easy, so there wasn't any reason not to get the extra experience. Eventually, the gang runs out to this part where I got even more influence with Atten, but then Scion showed up behind us and Kreia volunteered to 1v1 him. At another workbench, I gave myself a strength underlay that increases my strength and constitution by 1. Then for some reason, completely unbeknownst to me now in the present, I equipped the armor that restricts my force powers. Why would I do that? Am I stupid? Meanwhile, Kreia's like, I got a sword, and my chemical Sith Lord is like, I got a lightsaber, and he cuts her hand off, which Space Jesus can feel too, because it turns out they have a strong force bond. But he sucked it up and we went back to Paragus, where he found T3M4 still alive and ready to destroy more of his own robot kind. So I continued on, blowing up droids, disabling mines for experience. I got another level up that let me unlock the weapon specialization feat for melee weapons, giving the plasma torch +2 to damage, and the deflection power that lets me deflect blaster bolts without a lightsaber. We're gaming. At this point, we're back to where T3 was earlier, except this time we can actually fight our way through, unlock the door that goes to the Ebon Hawk Tua, kill some more droids, and make it to freedom. Strangely, when you do board the ship, a bunch of regular Sith troopers show up out of nowhere, even though we hadn't seen a single one of them this entire time on board, but who am I to judge? You're supposed to shoot them, but I always let them board the Ebon Hawk because you can fight them on the Ebon Hawk for extra experience and the remains. I was expecting this to be a bit of a challenge, but it actually was really easy. Between the energy resistance power and my deflections, they could barely even damage me. In a weird way, the plasma torch was forcing me to get powers and feats I usually don't to compensate, and this had resulted in me making a pretty good character. If I wasn't limited by my weaponry, I'd be an absolute unit. I did have another level up on the ship that let me get my strength up and unlock Force Barrier, which is like energy resistance except for melee attacks. After killing the last Sith, Kreia randomly appears on board the ship, we fly away, but the Harbinger is in pursuit, so we make the decision to shoot an asteroid, blowing everything else up, including the Harbinger and the planet Paragus, which, as you can see by the look on my character's face, is a decision he's very troubled by. I talked to Cray again to both progress the story and get free experience points, put the HK part I looted earlier into HK-47, and headed to the bridge.
There were plenty of times back on Paragus where a lightsaber would have been helpful. So where's yours?
I'm doing a plasma torch only challenge, Atten. Did you not read the title? Atten flies us to Telos, where upon arriving, we immediately get arrested for blowing up an entire planet, which is honestly understandable. An assassin broke in, disguised as security, so I had to fight him unarmed, meaning without the plasma torch. Frog cheating confirmed. We moved to house arrest, where the security promises to keep anyone weird away before allowing a hammerhead man to enter. And I'm now free to roam. You're also not required to have companions here, so I removed them from my party. I am once again solo and finally have peace and quiet. I looted apartments and got a quest to free a slave girl, no big deal, met with the Ithorian leader Chodo Habat, whose dialogue I sped through as fast as possible, and got to this store, which is really important. This store has a random selection of items the first time you interact with them. Call me cheap, but what I do is save and reload over and over again until I'm happy with what his selection is. Specifically, I was wanting Zeeson Shah Initiate Armor, which is fully upgradable and buffs your defense by 4, but doesn't restrict any force powers. I did another combat encounter where I don't have the plasma torch back yet. I took a second to unwind at the canteen and play Pazak. But I became the swoop racing champion for extra credits and freed the slave girl for experience. And cause freeing slaves is good. But mostly for the experience. I got all my stuff back, including the plasma torch, which signaled the end of my brief unarmed era. I did a couple side quests involving bounties, went to the Ithorian hangar and fought a bunch of bad guys who posed zero threat to me at all. Oh my god, are those the escaped criminals? Hello, Batono, it is I, Frogar Kist, also known by illiterate people as Frogar Christ. My next level up, by the way, got me Master Flurry and improved energy resistance. Why yes, I will help you smuggle black market goods and not turn you into the space police. Yo, Lieutenant Grin, guess what? I went to the exchange house to kill everybody, taxi driver style. At this point in the game, I still did not have the hang of this playstyle, and I think this exchange fight kind of illustrates that. Like, once again, I'm just not even using the powers that I invested in, and I'm taking way more damage than I should be taking. And then I had my first death of the playthrough in the final boss room, if you want to call it that. Rip the Deathless run. My second attempt at this fight, I just used a melee shield, which made everything Gucci. Then after killing Luxa, I turned my attention to the Lovecraftian monster standing behind the desk and took care of him as well. And by take care of, I mean I bashed his head in with my plasma torch. The last quest for the Ithorians involved me hacking Zerka's droid and stealing their data, and that was that. Chode Habit thanks me by increasing my force points and giving me a shuttle I can use since the Ebon Hawk was stolen. It's finally time to leave the station, but oh no, Zerka sent mercenaries to assault the Ithorian compound, and I gotta go save the day. This was like fighting the Sith on the Ebon Hawk, where I expected it to be a lot harder than it was. I did get kind of low on health, but I managed to kill the last mercenary, and I could use my new level up to unlock Night Speed, which gives me an extra attack each turn. So combined with Flurry, that would give me 3 attacks in one turn. I killed the mercenary leader, who was a complete bum. Then Chodo was like, we're funded by the Republic and in charge of restoring the entire planet, but I don't have a single dollar I can give you for saving us. So my reward for doing all that was nothing. I may be a Jedi, but I also have bills to pay. Have you heard of RP Grand? It's a new, really cool open world game that you can start playing for free right now on your phone. Like, look at this open world. This is all in a mobile game. It's amazing. Step 1 is creating your character. You can customize everything about your character, their face, their hair, and their clothes, so you can keep them fashion forward. Buy new clothes, put together outfits, and become the coolest person in the city. Want a dream home? You can buy your own mansion, live with friends, create a family, and grow together. Your lifestyle is your choice. Make money and do whatever you want. Become a gangster, a policeman, a businessman, or even a bus driver. It's up to you. RP Grand lets you be who you want to be. I've already played this game and reached level 15. You can join my family in the game, and I'd love it if you did. Just open the family section on your phone, type in my family name in the search, and become a part of it. Make sure to use my promo code displayed on screen to get a special gift that I secured just for my subscribers. Download RP Grand on your smartphone and let's build something amazing together. See you soon, and thanks to RP Grand for sponsoring this video. Anyway, the shuttle the Ithorians gave us gets shot down and we crash in a grassy field where we're met by Mormon Darth Maul. He's a required companion here, so I once again was not alone. All of this combat out here when I was a child I thought was so hard. And that kind of makes it sad how easy I found it with just the plasma torch. It really does highlight the importance of character building and prepping for fights rather than just charging in without a plan. Especially in this part right outside of the research base. This is legitimately really tough if you just charge right in. You basically just have to make sure to take out each individual group separately rather than trying to take on the whole base at once. Inside the old research base, it's droid and turrets galore. Unfortunately for them, I have many ways of dealing with blasters, and I spent the whole time giving them the business. The research base also includes the worst thing in the entire game, where you have to leave this Twi'lek out for light side points, but the problem is he's really dumb and gets stuck a lot. Move! I had a level up that let me get improved force heal. Wow, look at that big old droid. I bet he'll be tough to deal with. He did 0 damage to me. Oh my god, our shuttle crashed again, and this time we have to fight 3 HK-50 droids. Maybe this is disrespectful, but I didn't even bother to level up Kreia and Atten this time. I knew I had it in the bag. We went into a Jedi temple hidden in the snow and were greeted by a bunch of women who looked like Anderson Cooper, only to meet their leader, who was one of the Jedi Masters that cast me out of the Order, but is secretly evil at this point, even though that's not revealed yet. Spoiler alert. The best thing about Telos is that you get to spar the Handmaiden sisters, starting off easy and then getting progressively harder. And you may be wondering, why is it the best thing? Well, so after 3 rounds, they pair up and you take 2 of the women at the same time. As you can see, this was actually really hard for me and they almost took me out. Nonetheless, when asked if I wanted to take on all 5 at once, I said yes, of course. How am I supposed to take on 5 at once when I could barely take on 2? Well, if you just walk into one of them like this, they back up and you can push them off the mat. So that's what I did. I pushed each one off the mat until it was a 1v1. And hey, look at that, I beat all 5 of them. I'm not cheating, you're cheating. I freed my friends and gained influence with Bayo-Dur and then with Atten by asking him about his Achani training. Yo, what up, T3? Don't mind if I just gain influence with you too. Now on the Ebon Hawk, we watch a security camera of the Exiles trial, then find a list of which planets all the Masters in the trial fled to. Azula from Avatar also joins the gang.
Is there a reason you don't carry a lightsaber anymore?
My brother in Christ, I'm doing a plasma torch challenge. The Handmaiden is a little strange because you build influence with her by sparring with her in your underwear, which my main character doesn't take as a sign of anything, presumably because he has autism, but after taking a pit stop to Telos to turn in one of the bounties, I traveled to the first of 4 planets in the free roam section, Nar Shaddaa. Oh cool, story. Skip. I like doing Nar Shaddaa first because you get a couple new companions, there's lots of influence opportunities, and you can get the last lightsaber parts to construct a new one pretty quick. That doesn't really apply to this playthrough, but whatever. I did break one of my own rules and had the Handmaiden with me for a few fights here at the start because I knew one of them got me influence but couldn't remember which. But whenever I found the right one and increased her influence, I immediately removed her. I gave money to a homeless guy for light side points and got told by Kreia that charity can actually be a bad thing and create even more suffering. I personally disagree with this because whenever I've given homeless people money in real life, the meth they buy with it seems to make them much happier. I ran around and collected some side quests like one to return an astromech droid to a shop. I stood around for a solid 10 minutes and had an existential crisis about whether or not this would be a good video and if I should just do something else instead. Kreia talked to me telepathically again and I broke up a drug deal gone bad. Don't deal drugs, kids, or else a space wizard that looks like Jesus might beat you to death with a torch. The way Nar Shaddaa works is basically that once you do enough stuff, you get locked into a planet-specific quest line and lose all autonomy. So the way I deal with Nar Shaddaa is by doing literally everything I possibly can before ever returning to the Ebon Hawk. So after talking to everyone in the Flophouse and getting all their quests started, I ran to the refugee sector that has a bunch of its own missions, and a few of them you kind of solve together. Like these guys need a pilot, and this dude Otis in the refugee sector is a pilot, so you can hook them all up. I did bring along 2 party members here at first, Handmaiden and Atten. Handmaiden because there's an easy influence opportunity by healing a sick dude, and Atten because having him here triggers these 2 Twi'leks to spot him, and long story short, if you have enough influence, you can actually turn Atten into a Jedi. After doing these 2 things, though, I removed them both from the party because I had a lot of killing to do here. First, it was the Serico thugs, which there's a lot of, but I was gaining a better understanding of how best to use my character at this point, and they weren't an issue at all. Then there was the Exchange, who absolutely wrecked me my first attempt because I was using an energy shield even though they all had melee weapons. Not my smartest moment, but my second attempt at this fight featured a melee shield, which was the edge I needed to get through them. I resolved almost every side quest I had. The only one I was missing was to break into Vaga's treasure room, which I couldn't do because I needed certain party members that I didn't have currently. The reason I couldn't switch to the right party members was because, oh no, the Ebon Hawk has been taken over by lizard people. I did have Kreia and Bayo-Dur in my party at this point for influence and side quest reasons, but these guys weren't that tough anyway. The hardest fight is definitely against their leader, but something weird happened, so immediately after I killed him, I got experience and stuff, and the game saved and loaded, and I immediately next had to fight V Visas. The Ebon Hawk can't catch a break. It's just one thing after another. So yeah, I wasn't ready for Visas at all. I wasn't full health and had no plan, and she actually kind of wrecked me. Look at my health. Look at her health. I'll just let you watch how this played out. I don't know how I survived that. Afterwards, I turned Bayo Durka Durka into a Jedi, and we were supposed to meditate, but my guy had a bit of an issue getting into position. What is bro doing? I leveled up again and got improved toughness and master speed, then talked to Cray about getting a prestige class, which leveled me up again, and here are my stats. After beating up Handmaiden again, talking to Visas about nonsense, and doing force lessons with Kreia, I left the Ebon Hawk and received a phone call from the exchange, which starts the big Nar Shaddaa mission that I'm locked into for the next couple hours of the game. I have to go to a cantina called the Jek Jek Tar by myself, but on my way there, a redhead shows up and is like, don't believe the stereotype, I'm not crazy, and then she chloroforms you. Meanwhile, as that, and you get attacked by 2 Rule 34s you can cheese by just hiding behind the bar. Danger Zone gets herself captured, and we're back as the main character with basically the same objective as before, go to the Jek Jek Tar by myself and find the exchange leader. The problem is that there's a lot of bad guys in the Jek Jek Tar. The entirety of the place is trying to kill you because there's a large bounty on Jedi. However, and this seems to be a running theme, with all my powers and abilities active, they weren't really an issue. There's a couple rooms that are entirely full of just the Gand, which are bug people, and they literally do nothing. They're almost all unarmed, and with my force barrier power, they couldn't even damage me at all. My next level up, I got Master Valor, which increases all my attributes and saving throws by 5 while active, which is actually insane. I went through these tunnels where the map is disabled, and it's kind of like a maze, but I used the tried and true strategy of just always going left. I also found a second plasma torch that, unfortunately, I couldn't dual wield. My disappointment was immeasurable, and my day was ruined. After finding the entrance to the super secret bad guy base, the game cuts to you as Kathy Griffin, and this is one of the hardest parts of the entire game because you have to fight Hanhar, the Wookiee, who's slightly more powerful than a skinny 5'6" woman. I leveled up Mira all the way. I just got her basic scoundrel stuff, nothing too special. Even fully leveled, she still isn't really a match for Hoo-Hot straight up, so my strategy was to run around and try to get him to chase me into the mines placed around the arena. That worked in the sense that he did run into the mines, but I still got smoked. So my second attempt, I made things simpler and just abused melee shields and slowly got his health down all the way. Next, I had to fight Kath Hounds and escape where there are a bunch of Ubeast guards, which is a dumb name even by Star Wars standards. They're really tough though, and in my experience, Mira just isn't strong enough to fight them. Like, they've always wrecked her when I've tried. So what I always do is just beeline it to a console that opens the door my main character is at, which switches the perspective back to him. We are so back. I would say this is the point in the game where my character really started coming into his own. The guards that I didn't want to fight as Mira, I just completely destroyed. Part of this was obviously me continuing to level up my guy and get stronger, but also just me having a better understanding of the importance of my powers. No longer will you see me go into an encounter and not, at least to begin with, have all my buffs active. So I cleared the entire base and looted a bunch of stuff that I'll never use before going to the main area to confront the big bad. Then something I wasn't ready for happened, which was the game cut away from there to my companions. I was playing on the restored content mod for the first time in years, and this is a section it adds. I completely forgot about it. But yeah, I just mained Visas and tore my way through the bounty hunters. Meanwhile, my guy was having a casual conversation with Octopus Man before getting captured by Goto, the head of the exchange. Kreia heals the Wookiee and makes him her slave, and you switch to T3 trying to get codes or something to find Goto's ship. Oh hey, a puzzle. But yeah, there's the T3 part, then a completely pointless restored content section of you as the companions fighting through bounty hunters that the original game is better for not having. We find this guy who looks like my 9th grade history teacher, and we're now on Goto's ship trying to rescue me. I chose Visas and Aden as a rescue party, Visas because she was the strongest party member at this point, although not for much longer, and Aden because he has skills and more force levels than Bayo Dur. And boy was this a good decision because the two of them dominated Goto's robot army. This was a section that I remembered being tough, but I guess in past playthroughs I was just really bad at character building because this was a breeze. After finding my main character, the rest of this was even easier. I didn't actively switch to Aden or Visas to use their powers or anything during combat sections, but with them just backing me up, we were cruising. I think I've said this before in another video, but when I was a really little kid, my dad would give me the second Xbox controller and tell me I was one of the party members. So we went to the bridge and did some stuff, and oh no, other bounty hunters boarded. We gotta escape, And that's pretty much the Nar Shaddaa questline. We get one of Goto's robots as a companion who definitely isn't actually Goto himself. The guy who voices the commercials for the Marines tells us about why we were kicked out of the Jedi and teaches me a new lightsaber form. On my way out, I got jump scared by an HK-50 encounter that's not in the original game, and I just had a couple more things to finish up. I talked to Vaga the Hutt about sending fuel to the Republic, then I broke into his vault and stole everything he had, then tried my hardest to become a Pazak champion. He has a tiebreak card. That is such BS, dude. After beating up Handmaiden again, she told me she wanted to become a Jedi, and my guy was like, okay. So she turned into a Jedi, and from this point forward, she is the most powerful of all of my companions and a landslide. Mira was the only party member I had left to convert to Jediism, but I needed more awareness points, so before worrying about her, I flew to the next planet, Dantooine. Dantooine is a lot shorter than Nar Shaddaa, which is probably the longest planet. It's basically the same environment as in KOTOR 1, except now everyone hates Jedi and thinks they're the same as the Sith, even though the Jedi protected the planet for eons and the Sith bombed the planet and killed everyone. In a normal playthrough, I actually would have stopped here just to go into the Crystal Cave before then flying to Nar Shaddaa and doing all that stuff, but lightsaber crystals aren't all that important for me now, so I thought I could wait. But I did go ahead and grab all the lightsaber crystals, including mine. There's one specific crystal that's named after your character that gives you a bunch of different attribute upgrades, including to wisdom, which I really needed. I needed it for kind of a cheat reason. If I had a lightsaber equipped with my named crystal in it, it would boost my awareness enough to where I could go through Mira's dialogue and give her the Jedi talk. So I did have a lightsaber equipped here, but I didn't kill anyone with it, and that's what really matters. So boom, we went back to Nar Shaddaa for 2 seconds and she's a Jedi now. I will literally only use her one time the rest of the game, and it's because I'll have to. But I couldn't just not make everyone in my party be a Jedi. That would trigger extreme KOTOR 2 OCD in me. Anyway, on Dantooine, I talked to the ugly colony administrator who told me I could go into the Jedi Enclave ruins to find Jedi Master Vrook, and off I went. I fought some Cath hounds and talked to some shady people, and into the ruins I went. The ruins were populated by Lagrix, which were another enemy that I remember thinking as a kid were crazy tough. But my plasma torch build was unironically sick at this point, and I shredded them. 4 attacks. Another restored content thing is this Padawan who's been hiding in the ruins, stealing from settlers, and apparently controls the Lagrix.
My Lagrix? You've killed them. They're my pets.
Unfortunately, she's even worse at voice acting than I am.
Flash! Holy shit, they just shot at us.
I fought my way through the ruins, killing Lagrix. I set off a terminal and blew myself up by accident at one point, until I ran into the worst character in the game who single-handedly makes me never want to play as a female. More importantly, I found evidence that Vrook was being held captive in the Crystal Cave. Look at this idiot. With all my powers and buffs, the mercenaries holding Vrook couldn't even damage me. Literally nothing can stop me at this point. A bunch of mercenaries outside the cave? Whatever. Oh my god, look at what they just did to me. Individually, I was more than capable of taking them out, so I employed the old strat of getting them to split up so I could take them out individually or in groups of 2. It's kind of like the ending in Pale Rider when Clint Eastwood solos all the deputies. That's a boomer reference. All the mercenaries are supposed to assault the base, so it's my job to reinforce it. One thing I was completely unprepared for was another restored content thing. Usually the mercenaries' initial assault just plays out in a cutscene. In this, I actually had to take part and fight, the problem being I had 0 companions, and the militia on my side was completely outmatched, which meant the fight very quickly devolved into me having to take on an entire army myself. I did have a moment of panic where I thought this just wasn't going to be doable and I'd have to add my companions or do something to cheat and get around it. But before that point, I tried a bunch of different things. I gave a motivational speech, except I didn't have Persuade and basically just told the troops to kill themselves in Minecraft. I tried running away, but the game wouldn't let me. When all hope was lost, I was saved by the game deciding, nah, that's enough, and just jumping to the final phase, the fight inside, which is extraordinarily easy because I have assault droids on my side and like a third of the mercenaries to deal with. So I got completely bailed out, and that was Dantooine. Like I said, very short planet. Next up was Onderon, which as a kid I would always do first because it's by far my favorite. Not really because of the Onderon stuff though. Before even getting to Onderon, we get shot down by the military and end up on the forest moon of Duxon. Duxon begins with me poaching wild animals who are no match for the power of the plasma torch. I fought more of the Star Wars guys who are literally just stereotypical aliens because I guess George was running out of ideas. I came across a recently dead Mandalorian, then was greeted by currently alive Mandalorians who wanted to take me to their base. I spoke to their leader, who sounds exactly like Canderous from KOTOR 1, hint hint wink wink, and he sets me loose to build prestige. Basically, you just go around the base, completing quests and helping out, and after you do enough, he flies you to Onderon. One of these things was the battle circle, where I fought Mandalorians unarmed, which really highlighted how much I was being held back by the plasma torch. Like, look at the damage disparity. I do 20 to 38 damage with no weapon at all, and only 20 to 25 with the plasma torch. This quite literally would have been an easier challenge if I got to play the whole game with no weapon at all. Back in the wilderness, I slaughtered more wildlife, including these strange humanoid creatures called scouts, got taught a new force power by Kreia that I'll never use, rescued this Mandalorian who was stuck on a ridge, killed a giant turtle, set off explosives which alerted every single living thing in the jungle of my presence, and fought the last couple battle circle champions. That was all the stuff I had to do to go to Onderon. Kreia asked to speak to Canderous' manager. Some Sith assassins showed up who had weirdly high health, like I'm doing about 100 damage per turn and he's barely even going down, it's weird. But after taking an hour hour to clear the base, it was Onderon time. You're required to have Mandalore with you through Onderon, so he stuck around for the entirety of the planet. Listen, I'm not trying to be a space racist, but anyone who looks like this has gotta be evil, right? Like, come on. Onderon has a couple of fights against big gangs of bounty hunters who try to kill you despite the bounty clearly stating they want a live Jedi. But with this first group, I could one-shot everyone, and Pedro Pascal took a lot of their damage for me. Basically, Onderon is all about finding his friend Dagon Gint, who can get us in touch with the Jedi, but come to find out, he's the prime suspect in a murder trial. So after taking on another group of bounty hunters who were no match for the plasma torch, I shifted my focus to proving Dagon's innocence. Hello, weirdest looking person I've ever seen in a video game. What do you know about the murder? I went around asking everyone what they knew about the murder and investigating outside and yada yada yada. I went into the Treyas Corps to kill Darth Treya. Actually, let me back up. That was way too many yada yadas. I found a recording from a destroyed droid that clears Dagon Gint, so me and weird-faced McGillicuddy brought it to the captain in charge of the investigation and got Dagon freed. Dagon James Keenan tells me he can get in contact with the Jedi, but first I gotta get stuff from Bakel back in the cantina, and let me just tell you that all this stuff is way more tolerable on a modern PC than on my old original Xbox, where every time I went into a new area it would take 20 minutes to load. But I got the stuff he needed and finished up a couple quests, and Master Kavar showed up at the bar where he shared stories from his frat days before joining the Order, until suddenly generic evil guy showed up with some of the Onderonian military, and the rest of the planet involves fighting our way back to the ship. The planet of Onderon is approaching a civil war where the light side option is to side with the Monarch, who wants Onderon to stay part of the incredibly weak Republic that provides nothing, while the dark side option is to side with the General, who's beloved by Onderon's people and wants the planet to regain independence. More importantly, after fighting through everyone, including another random HK-50 encounter, we made it back to the shuttle and flew to Duxon, and that's 3 of the 4 planets completed. Well, more like 2.5, but whatever, on to Korriban. Every other planet in the game is a multi-hour experience, but Korriban, looking at my recording, took me about 1 hour exactly. It's really short. You go into the Sith Academy that you studied at in the first game, except now it's run down and everyone except Darth Simon is dead. Also, feat update, at this point I was completely out of worthwhile feats to pick. I started upgrading dueling, even though I'm pretty sure it didn't do anything for the plasma torch. I ran around the academy killing assassins and Tukata. I had to take a written test about the Sith. Which of the following Sith Lords does not possess a tomb on Korriban? I don't know, let me consult Wikipedia. The next test was a fight against starving Tukatas, which apparently I did poorly at, so next it sent me off to the torture chamber where Master Vash spilled a glass of wine and passed out. The academy ends with a fight against Darth Zion Williamson, and my first attempt I got demolished. But using what I learned from that fight, I went into my second attempt much better prepared and was able to best him. I even got an achievement for it. For the main quest line, that's it for Korriban, but the real main attraction for Korriban can be found in the Chirac Cave. After going through and killing a bunch of dogs and giant bats, I found an ancient Sith tomb that Kreia tells me is very dangerous. Upon entry, I saw a vision of Malak trying to recruit Jedi to follow him and Revan to the Mandalorian Wars. And after I told him that I wouldn't follow him to the dark side, him and the rest of the Jedi turned on me. I got Malak down to 1 hit, but they ended up beating me. My second attempt, I tried using a shield to buy myself time to use power-ups before focusing on Malak, but that failed too. But then on my third attempt, I did kind of the same thing, and this time it actually worked. Such is the way of a game where combat is based on dice rolls. I went around the tomb fighting Chirac and using my force powers, which I thought nothing of, until I noticed that my force wasn't recharging. I guess I completely forgot about this, but yeah, it just doesn't recharge in the tomb until you advance enough. So I came to this room that has a ton of Chirac, and because I didn't know when my force would come back, I tried taking them on without any powers. And my god, it took forever. I only had 2 attacks per turn instead of 4, and I didn't get the buffs from Force Valor. This one room took me about 4 minutes to clear. Afterwards, I came to a Mandalorian Wars vision where apparently in the war I gave an order that resulted in a bunch of soldiers needlessly dying, so this time I didn't and just ran through a bunch of mines like a man. After killing the Mandalorians across the bridge, my force regenerated and I was back in the fold. A bit further ahead, I ran into a Kreia vision who was peepo ignoring me for some reason, and then all of my companions showed up and started saying that Kreia was evil and I needed to choose between them and her. But like a Redditor, I said that they're all visions and none of this matters, to which they told me,
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death. Apathy is death.
Statement. Apathy is death.
I just answered that way for the apathy is death meme and didn't think I'd actually be able to survive all my companions at once. But I surprised myself and did manage to take down Kreia in time, which causes everyone else to vanish. The final room in the tomb sees me encounter Darth Revan, who makes the very base decision to wield a red and purple lightsaber, which is a very satisfying color combination. He wasn't that difficult. Like, the Malak fight was hands down the hardest part of this entire thing, despite being the first one. But nonetheless, that was pretty much it for Korriban. So I returned to the the ship where T3 told me I got a message from the Mandalorian saying I needed to go back to Duxton because Onderon was in trouble. Unfortunately for them, I had to go to the gym in real life to avoid falling fully to the gamer side, so their silly civil war would have to wait. When I did make it to Onderon, the Mandalorians went over the game plan with me, and long story short, I had to choose 3 companions to go on a mission by themselves. I chose Visas, Adden, and of course, the Handmaiden. I was really glad that at the start, I decided that the rules basically didn't apply to the companion sections because this probably was my favorite part of the entire playthrough. We were just 3 Jedi having a good time, absolutely destroying everything and making this game's hardest difficulty look like Reader Rabbit. And I will just say that this playthrough made me want to replay this game again without any stupid rules like Plasma Torch only, so maybe I'll stream that sometime. Inside of the Sith Tomb, I found a couple of terminals that asked me questions I was too lazy to figure out myself and Google the answers to. Then I continued slaughtering Sith with almost no problems whatsoever until I made it to the final fight against 3 very powerful Sith Lords. They weren't a problem, and that was it for the companion mission. Back now as Space Jesus, we flew to Onderon, and I was required to have Kreia as a companion who basically provides nothing of value except occasionally healing me. I fought my way up the ramp through Vaklu's soldiers, then did a dumb turret minigame. Wait a second, I'm killing guys as my main character without the plasma torch. Frog Archist, more like Fraud Archist. Inside the palace, there were actually some tricky fights where the game would throw a bunch of stuff at me at once. I did my best to manage it, and my force powers and high constitution had me able to tank quite a bit, even without wearing heavy armor or anything stupid. Look at these stats after my next level up. 39 strength, 22 constitution, which gave me 493 vitality. I was a freaking tank at this point. More Vaklu soldiers allied with the Sith? Give me a break. No one is a match for the power of the plasma torch. A giant lizard monster who looks like he could literally pull me apart in half? Yeah, step aside, little bro. I got business to take care of. On one of my level ups before this, I got the battle meditation power specifically for this bit in the palace where you can power up the guys on your side of the fight and help them win. At this point, I was completely out of actual useful feats and powers to get. I had everything that could help me. We're literally about to stop a civil war and Master Kavar is so bored he's stretching. So I fought Vaklu and he was easy. Then Kreia asked if I was going to execute him and I wanted to say yes but knew I'd get dark side points. So I turned it over to the Queen who I knew would do it for me while still allowing me to have the moral high ground. 5D light side chess here, folks. Master Kavar told me a bunch of stuff that I skipped through as fast as possible and that was it for Onderon. I had one place left to go. Dantooine, where all the Jedi Masters I found would be waiting for me at the Jedi Enclave to rebuild the Jedi Order. See, look at that. They rebuilt the temple and everything. And it looks just like it did in the first game, except not as bright and more depressing because that's just how this game is. So basically, I found the Jedi Masters in the old council chamber where I'm like, hello, Masters, that I rounded up in an effort to save the galaxy, and they're like, you're a terrible person and we need to permanently cut you off from the Force. So they freeze me in place and cut me off, and that's how the game ends. Just kidding. Kreia shows up and is like, even though I'm worthless as a party member, I'm actually a giga-powerful Sith Lord and sucks the life right out of them. My guy woke up and I unlocked a new force power called Force Enlightenment, which is the single greatest light side force power ever invented. We'll get to that. First, though, I went back to the Ebon Hawk where Adden says Kreia took Handmaiden back to Atris's academy on Telos, and we also learned that the Sith are planning on attacking Telos themselves. So you can guess where I went next. Atris's academy has another restored content thing where, as the Handmaiden, you actually fight the rest of the sisters rather than it being in a cutscene. They actually did a surprising amount of damage to me, and I did have to cheese a bit with shields and running around. Then Atris shows up, who I two-shotted as the Handmaiden before the Exile appears. So this Force Enlightenment power, instead of having to individually go through and use all my force powers that buff me like Valor or Speed, Enlightenment just automatically activates them all. So my character, who was already destroying everyone, was made that much more efficient. Unfortunately, I did not two-shot Atris, but I did three-shot her, and she retreated to her lair of Sith holocrons because, as it turns out, she'd fallen to the dark side, and all the box art and marketing around this game with her representing the light side was actually a misdirection. Bravo, Vince. After beating her again, I decided not to kill her because I'm a good guy. Handmaiden told me that her real name is Brianna, and I was like, who asked? And then I went to Citadel Station where the Sith were invading, led by Darth Nihilus. I think this is a good illustration that I'm not exaggerating about how good my character is. Like, look at this fight. Between my buffs and force deflection and upgrades and everything, I'm literally just not even taking damage. I have solved the game. I was using Enlightenment before every single fight and two-shotting basically everyone. And also, I think this whole part is cool, where you go back through the Citadel Station that was peaceful and now it's overrun by Sith. The last fight on the station was definitely the trickiest. There are a few Sith plus one with a lightsaber who was actually able to do a decent number on me. But alas, Space Jesus is king. Inside Nihilus' ship, you're required to have both Mandalore and Visas with you. I didn't care about Mandalore Mandalore at all and just auto-leveled him up. And you'll never believe this, but I blew through all the Sith on the ship with no problems at all. Like, I swear to God, this was on the hardest difficulty. My main concern at this point was getting as many life support packs as possible. Pretty much every other Sith that had remains had one, so I was able to stock up before the final planet. I ran into generic bad guy number 1 again, who was now a slave to Nihilus, but not in a fun way, and killed him because he asked me to, which for some reason raised my influence with Visas. Speaking of Visas, we went to her old chamber and she had a woman moment or something. I wasn't really listening. We fought our way to the bridge where Darth Ghostface tried to suck the life force out of me before realizing I was not an ordinary Jedi and he'd have to fight me straight up. He wasn't that hard at all, and we whittled him down, and Visas for some reason was like, oh my god, he's too powerful, let me sacrifice myself, before I told her to shut up, and after a few more turns we had him beat. I remember watching my dad play this for the first time, and after he beat Nihilus, he literally said, that's it. It's a super hyped fight that turns out to be really easy. Mandalore said a few things about Darth Revan, even though he's been dead since before the first game, and we made our way back out of the ship, and that was that. Telos was saved. Back on Citadel Station, Karth wanted to talk to me about highly sensitive events from KOTOR 1 that I'm not going to spoil, because if you've never played it, you need to do so right now to avoid learning any information about what happens. Like, seriously. Go play the game. Meanwhile, on Malachor 5, Kreia now looks like a Sith rather than just a mean old lady, and she little bros Scion and turns him into her apprentice again. This makes Malachor 5 the final planet of the game. It was very important for me as the exile to go through and take out all the storm beasts along the way to Kreia. One time when I was a kid and only saved in one slot, I ran past them all only to have to come back through here as Bayo-Dur's remote, and because I didn't have any other saves, had basically soft-locked myself from being able to finish. I avoided them back then because they were too tough for my main, but as you can see now, they are yet another foe that my plasma torch simply dominates. I continued on, fighting storm beasts until I finally made it to this part where the door is locked behind me ominously and a giant storm beast appears. This guy caught me completely by surprise. I knew I'd fight him, but he did crazy damage that I wasn't expecting, and I had my first death in a while. I followed it up my second attempt though with a hard-fought battle. Despite him doing massive damage, I was just able to beat him with only 7 health points left. The doors opened up and I died somehow. Alright. My third attempt I beat him again, but made sure I had plenty of health left when I did so I couldn't get BS'd again. And I made it to the Treyas Academy where a bunch of Sith assassins appeared and kneeled at my feet. Meanwhile, in more restored content, my companion somehow made it to the core ahead of me and plotted to take Kreia out. I did the bit earlier that I mentioned as the remote where I went around and activated the different parts of the mass shadow generator to destroy the planet. My other companions got wrecked by Kreia, Adden ran away and got caught by Darth Scion, so that's less than ideal, and my MC was now in the final dungeon. The enemies here were actually pretty strong and there were a lot of them, but it wasn't too challenging to move in a way to split up the group somewhat when necessary. And again, I was using Enlightenment before every single fight. I did have a few upgrades to my armor, giving me resistance to energy damage, which lessened how much lightsabers would do to me, especially combined with the energy resistance force power, but I still had a couple moments that made me monka. This room was really tough. There were a couple dark Jedi and guys with blasters and storm beasts, and if I didn't have a level saved for a free heal, I definitely would have eaten it. But alas, I did have a level saved and was able to clear the room afterward, even though they did take my health down a lot again. There's this weird restored content part where your allies are in cells and your only options are to save or gas them, and no one says anything except Mandalore, which I guess makes sense. He must have been like the only actor who actually recorded lines for this. Anyway, I fought more Sith until I made it here where Darth Scion said, howdy do. I had like 30 Verpine shields left, which are insanely OP, so I started using them here. As far as the fight goes, again, the plasma torch cooked. You have to take down his health all the way 4 times because he keeps reviving, but I was never in danger of dying. This, unironically, was probably the best character I've ever made. Had I been able to use a lightsaber, I probably would have been one-shotting him. So yeah, after the 4th time he gave up and I told him that he was too scared to die, to which he said cap, and then he died. All I had left was Kreia, otherwise known as Darth Treya, because she's a betrayer. Do you get it? The fight has 2 phases. The first is just against Kreia, and this is becoming a running theme, but she basically didn't even damage me. The second phase is against 3 floating lightsabers that actually do pretty decent damage. I just had to cycle plasma torch attacks with shield uses and enlightenment after my powers ran out. I feel like this is somewhat anticlimactic, but yeah, I didn't die or was ever in danger of dying. I took out the final floating lightsaber and that was it. Kreia was defeated. Adden was on the ground on the way out and apparently died. Rip bro. And hey, we did it. Plasma torch only. Jesus Christ, this is a long video. And if you liked it, be sure to check out my other videos like the one on screen. Thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. I'll catch you next time.